welcome to the RevOps podcast. I am your host, Jordan Henderson. You guys notice that I've started saying that I am your host exclusively, not co-host, just so you guys know.
Whoa.
Taking it over.
When did you get the promotion?
Self-given. But I am, of course, your host, Jordan Henderson, Director of Revenue Operations, RingDNA, and I am joined today by Jonathan Stevens and Brandon Redlinger. Go ahead and say hi, guys.
I am your I guess, co-host now, or I don't even know what's beneath that. But hey, guys, it's Brandon. I'm your participant, Brandon Redlinger,
and I'm the assistant to the co-host.
There you go. I think you're supposed to say assistant co-host, and then I correct you. That's how that works. Cool. And of course, we have our ghost participant, Alec, who will almost certainly participate via chat. And we will not have him say hi because we're not inviting him in right now. But thank you, everybody. This week, so I want to continue actually talking about, we sort of, last week's episode dove into what I would call RevOps 201, talking about SDR metrics and how they're important, how you solve things, how you use them from a marketing standpoint to better improve your entire revenue operation. I want to continue on that vein because I think it's a really interesting structure. I think it was really helpful, and I think it's going to be really helpful for our audience. So this week, I want to do some CSM metrics that I think are super important that are going to align. Before I jump into that, though, we've done an entire episode on CS stuff. I actually totally forget, and maybe it's because I pay limited attention, but Brandon and Jonathan, have either of you ever done CS work, customer success work?
No, not really. I mean, working with them, but never been a CSM or anything like that before. No.
Same.
Got it.
Yeah, mainly just coordinated very heavily with, but not directly involved.
Got it. I mean, that makes sense. I don't think I would trust either of you managing customer accounts, so that's totally fair.
Whoa.
I actually, for what it's worth, my first job in tech was as a CSM and ultimately became a manager of a CSM team. It was my first management job in tech. And so I've sort of been in the weeds and managed CS teams over the years and done a lot of CS work. I think at the time I was carrying about 95 customers at one point, which was an absurd amount of customers to carry. Yeah, which was rough. But it's tough job, and it's all of our CSMs listening. It's also super, super important for a lot of reasons, right? I mean, we've talked about that the previous episode, but it's such an indicator of success in your business and your long-term growth and your upsell potential. And there's just so much there that's super, super important. So continuing on the vein of RevOps 201, though, I want to dive into a couple of metrics that I think are super important for the CSM team to track, as well as across your entire revenue operation. And the first thing I want to talk about is adoption. I think adoption has probably been beaten to death. And there's, I think, what I would call two different types of adoption. There's product adoption and feature adoption. Does any of you want to give a definition of either of those two things? I'm gonna start doing this like Socratically, by the way. I'm just gonna cold call and be like, "Hey, Jonathan, tell me about product adoption."
Oh God. So product adoption is how much adoption. Okay, I'm gonna start with the simple, but I'll elaborate. How much adoption in your product a customer has. So that means how many actually employees at your customer's account are actually adopting the product and using it.
Close. This was the best elaborate definition you've given, because you say how much is your customer adopting the product?
I was waiting for that. Yeah, I was waiting for that.
I should have just stopped there.
But it's important. You're really close. The only distinction I would make is actually not how many employees at the company are adopting your product. It's how many of the people who have access to your product are adopting your product. So if a company has 700 employees, but they've only about 100 licenses because only the sales team is using it, I don't measure against the 700 employees. I measure against the 100 licenses, right? And so it's more of a metric of if I sell you 100 licenses of RingDNA and 85 people are logging in and using RingDNA, then their adoption rate is 85% from a product standpoint.
So we're taking a step out. We're looking at it as our company as opposed to as a particular account within the company.
We're looking at it as that customer, percentage of licenses used, essentially. Would be the way I would look at it. Yep, exactly. And then you can measure that across your entire base, right? We've sold 43,000 total licenses and we have 41,000 people logging in. So our adoption is whatever that math is. I'm not going to do it. But you get the picture of product adoption. So very, very broad metric for adoption. Can be helpful in a lot of ways. We'll talk about that in a minute. Before we do, feature adoption. Different thing. Brandon, do you want to try it?
I mean, I would say the same thing. How many people within of the seats that you have, how many people are actually using a specific feature?
Totally. Yeah. Right. It's exactly right. So how many of your existing users are using a specific feature, which is to say, like, if you have 100 users and 25 of them are using a specific feature, that feature's adoption rate is 25%, which is different because you might have 100% product adoption rate. Just that 25% of them are using one specific feature, which is also, it's a sort of drilled down version of adoption, but can be super helpful in a lot of ways. So I want to start there. As a marketer, and Brandon, this is sort of specific to you, you're a product marketer. And so product and feature adoption, I think, would be very important. Why are these important to you? What would you use something like feature adoption for? What would you use something like product adoption for?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, I look at feature adoption a lot, actually. And like specifically, really when we're either in beta or we've done a full GA with a specific feature, but it's like, are people actually using this? Are they getting the value out that we thought they would get out of it, right? But I also think things like beyond just like adoption itself, I want to see people actually using the feature. So if there's a bunch of software tools out there, but you can actually see in real time as people are clicking around. That gives you so much insight into how you actually build a product. And the better you build a product, the more it's going to get adopted too, right? Like I distinctly remember early days, at a previous company, like we're looking at, there's a lot of usage, like, right, of this specific feature, but they're not actually completing the specific action. They're on this page, and they're on this page a lot, and they're on this page for a good amount of time, but they're clicking around, and you're like, the button's right there. It's so freaking obvious that it's right there. But they're just like, yeah, I'm like, right? Like, it actually gives you so much insight into how you actually should be building a product. It's kind of like that. Like I had a product leader too, that I worked with in the past. And he was like, it should be here because of this. And he would explain why he put it there. And I'm just like, dude, but people don't want to click there. It's like the bad joke. If you have to explain the joke, it's a bad joke. If you have to explain the UI, it's probably not a good UI.
Yeah,
so,
right. Yeah.
And a heat mapping tool can definitely be a valuable thing to put in. So then you can see where people are clicking and where they're scrolling and where they're interacting. And that can help you inform your UI.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys are sort of diving into like answering the question of okay, so like nobody's adopting this feature. Like, what do I do? Right? And like heat mapping is certainly a part of that. Like, if nobody's adopting a feature, like, yeah, we want to know why, and heat mapping can be a way to identify what that is. But I want you to zoom back for a minute, actually. Mm-hmm. So like, put on your marketing hat, right? If I come to you and I say, you know what, we have 9,000 users, and only 25% of them are using this feature that we think actually solves a business problem for all 9,000 users. Like, what can we do from a marketing standpoint to increase feature adoption?
Yeah, good question. So I think, I mean, kind of in your question there is like, yeah, let's make sure that like we test this hypothesis that like this is something that they really need to be using. So I never want to measure a feature just to measure the feature's usage, right? It is mainly because adoption of this feature leads to better experience, leads to more product adoption, leads to retention, upsells, etc.
Retention, longevity, upsells, more revenue.
Net dollar retention, right? Like, yeah, like I really want to be paying attention to those things that really lead to success. And okay, if we've decided that that is the case, then yeah, let's really look at this weekly. Let's report on it. Let's set those baselines and then make sure that this gets the attention that it needs. What was your question?
Did you just
I was like, I have an idea that I got to get out of the way first, and then I'll maybe answer his question.
This is why I show up with a high sodium content.
I wasn't distracted by Slack this time. It wasn't Slack.
Yeah. No,
I closed Slack.
Maybe I'll step back for a minute and I'll get to my question. But let me ask this, because I think people typically think of feature adoption as just a CS metric, right? Like it's like is our CS team effectively like getting people to use the product the way we think they should be using it? And then that's true. It's certainly a great metric for that. Have you ever, as a product marketer, had a feature adoption based goal? And what I'm thinking of is a scenario where, as a product marketer, we release a new feature, and your job as a product marketer is to communicate that to the customer base, right? In a lot of ways.
Yep.
Like, do you ever have a goal tied to that?
100%. Yeah. Like every time we're either in beta, I actually do a launch. Absolutely. I mean, feature adoption is like probably the number one thing. That, and another more common one too is just how much, either free trials or actually revenue that you would get from that specific feature. But absolutely, every time I want an actual feature adoption goal, every single time.
The last thing you want to do is have an amazing feature in your product that no one knows about because it hasn't been communicated. There's no documentation on it. There's no training on it. So it's a big one.
See, that's a really good point. There's also a sort of caveat to that, right? The actual last thing you want to do is think that you have an amazing feature in your product that nobody actually wants. Because that happens a lot too. People are like, check out this awesome thing. And you're like, yeah, I don't care. Like that doesn't do anything for me, right? Which goes back to like using this to inform your product team on what to invest time and resources in, right?
Well, hopefully you're getting that out of the way in your customer development, in your interviews, and then if you still decide it's worth pursuing, maybe you discover that in beta. Like I don't ever want to get to GA, get to general availability, where I'm launching it to the entire customer base, if I don't know that it is actually something that the customers want and they would find value in. So hopefully you're doing that work early and you're not getting to GA and like, oh shoot, maybe we shouldn't have built this in the first place.
Totally. So let me ask this then, and then I'll dive into what is always the last question as it relates to a specific metric. But do you ever use feature or product adoption to inform marketing campaigns or upsell approaches from a marketing standpoint?
Well, I think if it is something that we deem a valuable feature and we do have low adoption of that, absolutely 100%. So we can do a lot of things that it is really orchestrated, everyone doing it at once. So it's not just marketing, but like marketing might be doing some email campaigns for education. We might put together some videos that we actually put guided walkthrough in the product using something like Pendo. We could arm CSMs.
Shout out
with
Pendo. Thank you for that. No, I'm just kidding.
Shout out Pendo. That's right. Thanks for sponsoring the podcast. We'll collect that fee later. And arm CSMs, arm AEs with the actual enablement content, so that it's an entire integrated campaign, not just hey marketing, send some emails.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Totally. Jonathan, you unmuted. You have something there?
I think he nailed it on the head.
He just wanted to reinforce that he thought that was an awesome answer. Thank you for that. So,
yeah, I mean, tools like Pendo or WalkMe, making sure that you've got the right tools in place inside your product to really enable the person using your product to know where things are, can train on them easily, figure out how to work with things. That's just so critical.
Yeah, totally. There's another thing here too, because we're sort of looking at this as like feature adoption across the entire customer base. And there's a thing that as a marketer, I think is super valuable, which is, say I've released a feature and I'm measuring feature adoption. I've set a goal and one company is like, yeah, hell yeah, we got 100% feature adoption. Like one of my customers is just roaring towards this thing, right? And it is solving a business problem for you as a business. Like that's awesome. That's what you want, right? Everybody else is lagging behind. And this happens all the time. Like some customer will be like, oh, hell yeah, we're doing that. And other customers will be like, we don't have the bandwidth. Common answer. I say it to Jonathan all the time when he asks me for things. I often have the bandwidth. I just say I don't. But in those scenarios, this is a great chance for your marketing team to come in to that person with the customer success manager and say, hey, can we do a case study on why this new feature is just kicking ass for you? Because we want to use that to then inform the rest of the market about how awesome this thing is, right? New customer acquisition also. I can then use that feature and use it to sell new customers with the same use case. Like that feature adoption to that specific customer is going to help inform my marketing strategy for new customers, my feature adoption strategy for existing customers, my sales team's outbound approach for new customers, all of that, and my demos, by the way. Well, now I'm demoing this new feature.
Yeah.
I get that one customer has now changed my entire revenue operation because of that metric.
Yep. Social proof is everything in 2020. And
1,000%.
And
Social proof, you can just remove social proof is everything. It just is. Like it has been everything for 40 years. Like that's not changing in any way, shape, or form. We're just more connected. But not to overstate the value of this, it's extremely valuable and important, right? Like it's a very important metric. So obviously, I'm passionate about feature adoption. I didn't really realize that until this conversation, but I apologize to everybody. But I want to sort of dive into what is the last question, and we can answer this, I think, from revenue operations, marketing in general, sales. So I have terrible feature adoption of a feature that I think is valuable. What do I do? Like, what do I do with that information? And the first question, I'll sort of answer the first thing you should ask, which is this feature actually valuable for customers? That's like, you think it is. You might be right. You might be wrong. People build products all the time or build features all the time that people don't want or don't care about or don't see the value in. And so the first thing you have to ask is it valuable? And go to some customers and walk them through it. People that you have a trusting relationship with that have a problem that you think you can solve with that feature, and walk them through it and see what they think. If they're all like, hey, no, like this doesn't cut it for me. Like, great. You need to go back to the drawing board before you worry about getting people to adopt that feature. Like that's not a problem that you're ready to solve yet. But let's assume the answer to that question is yes, this feature is awesome and it solves the problem. I still have low feature adoption. What can I do?
All right, so this is what I've done in the past. I think it works actually pretty well. Put together a little Tiger team. Look at the data. Look at who's using it. Maybe you segment by users, by titles, by company size, whatever that might be, and really as a Tiger team, like try to figure out what's the underlying reason, right? Like I think you and your team will have good intuition, and just get in a room, start talking. You'll build off of each other's ideas, and then just like throw a bunch of ideas out there. No judgment on the ideas themselves, but just like try to get every single idea that you can out there to try to help increase this adoption. And then from there, you can actually start to prioritize these. And I like to use the ICE acronym. So it's impact, confidence, and ease. What impact do I think this idea is going to have? What's my confidence in this actually working? And how easily can I actually implement this? In ease could be speed. It could be resources. It could even be budget if you're doing a campaign around it. And then you stack rank those, and then you take the top, one or two, no more than three, and start to implement those. Do that in a 2-week sprint, and then start to measure. And then from there, you can actually start to optimize that. You can start to tweak that. You'll get insights, and then hopefully you'll see that adoption going up. But if I really think you start with that Tiger team, get some top ideas going, and then you can roll it out. And it could be just product. Your first ideas are just product, things that you can actually tweak in the product. It could be product, but also marketing supports in this other way, right? So
could be training resources that your CS team needs to build it out. It could be like just simple video walkthroughs that your marketing team can put together about how to implement the tool. It can be just mass communications that are more aggressive and more assertive and more exemplifying the problem that you're solving. It could be better work on the AE side, identifying the business problems that your current customers are facing so that you can identify which ones are ripe to have this feature adoption. There's lots of things that could go into this, but I think the Tiger team idea is a great way to get started on this. I think you have to, and that Tiger team should be, by the way, cross-functional.
100%. Yep, 100%. And you really have to have like a team first mentality on it, because product will come, sales will come, marketing will come, all with their own agendas, and they're like, here's like, here's how I want this to specifically advance my own agenda or my own KPIs.
Yeah. Like I want this because I want more upsells. Like
right,
that's
exactly.
not that. No, like the goal is feature adoption, and yes, that's a piece of it. But
it's got to be a team first mentality.
Totally. Which is why, for what it's worth, as a RevOps person, and this is the RevOps podcast, it's super important for RevOps to be in Tiger teams like this, because your job, in a lot of ways, is to make sure that Tiger team is aligned towards a team first, revenue operations first mentality, getting the feature adopted, getting it rolled out, improving the feature, improving upsells, improving longevity, improving our marketing materials, improving our marketing reports are all pieces of that, but they are the secondary goal to the top goal, which is feature adoption. That's what you're doing this for.
And the other reason, I mean, RevOps is so huge too, is like you're the ones who actually know how to track this and how frequently you should be tracking it and where you should actually put in these metrics, and then how often do you report back on these metrics and to whom, right? Like that is such a key piece of all of this. Otherwise, we have a bunch of ideas, and I've been guilty of this in the past too. It's like, we're all really excited about this. We all launched this, and then we actually never are held accountable, and we never check again.
Nobody ever checks, like, did this get better?
Exactly. It's like, it was the hottest thing the CEO wanted that day.
Yeah.
So we're putting out this fire, and then he moves on to the next thing, and everyone else forgets about it too.
Yep. And then, by the way, what that does is your product team gets real pissed because they've spent so much time and energy building this thing, and then you were like, "Yeah, we're gonna get it rolled out," and then you like sort of do and move on, and the product team is like, "Yo, bro, what?" Like we worked so hard on this,
and it goes back to your point. Like, let's make sure this is the thing that we need to be working on right now. Like, prioritization. You know.
Yeah, I think more important than anything is, I see this all the time, is not putting yourself in your customer's shoes and not actually seeing how your customer is using the product. So if it's got a bad user experience, it's clunky, you can't really easily use it, you can't easily administrate it, nobody's going to use it. So things like that have got to be really looked at.
Totally. And that's the sort of information that you bring to the Tiger team, right? Like the Tiger team should be gathering that sort of feedback as a part of their process.
Yeah, that's usually the biggest reason I'll turn off from a product, other than having redundancies. I might have another product that does the same thing that works better. So you also have to understand the tech stack.
I've seen you turn off on a lot of products. There's a lot of reasons you've given me as to why you did. Like UI turns you down. Like there's a list of reasons why you might dislike a product that's a lot longer than most people's list, if I'm being honest.
It's true. But it's important.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to get some honest feedback on a product, I guarantee if you reach out to Jonathan, he will give you honest feedback on what your product looks like. You'll get a lot of usable information. You might disagree with some of it. Most of it will be accurate, though. So just a note for any of our listeners that are like, I want somebody to look at this. Jonathan will do it, and he will tell you why it's bad. Cool. All right. Anybody have any other last thoughts on feature adoption or product adoption? I guess adoption in general.
I don't think so.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Then I think we've kicked that can around long enough. I want to go into the next one, which is also a fairly dense one, but I think will be a little bit faster than feature adoption, because I think it's very valuable. It's a very valuable thing, which is customer health scoring in general. Customer health can be measured in a lot of ways. I'm gonna take this off of you guys' plate and give a bit of an overview on this one to avoid what would almost certainly be a painful experience for our listeners. I told you, high sodium content today. But customer health is a really broad way of saying how you're measuring the health of your customers. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. Some companies have very complex formulas that measure like usage, engagement, sentiment, like all these different factors, and then aggregate that into some customer score that's like green, red, yellow, or like a score of 0 to 100, right? And there's tools that do this. There's Gainsight, and there's Involve.ai, and there's a bunch of tools that really do awesome stuff with your customer health score. There's also companies that just do it as simple as like, we use NPS as customer health. And net promoter score for anybody listening who's not familiar is essentially when you log into an app and it says, 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, 0 to 10, how likely are you to refer us to another customer? And the way that works is 9 or 10 is what's called a promoter, 7 or 8 is called passive, and 0 to 6 is a detractor. And what you do is you take the percentage of your promoters and subtract the percentage of your detractors. So if you have 40% of people are promoters and 30% of people are detractors, you kick out passive, they don't count at all. You would subtract the detractor 30% from 40%, which gives you an NPS score of 10, right? And that's like a broader health metric for your entire customer base, but each customer obviously has an NPS score. And some people use this as essentially like their sole directional truth as customer health. And so there's a lot of ways to measure this. So zooming back, customer health in general can be measured in a lot of ways. Usually it's some indication of how healthy your customer is, to be the Jonathan in this definition. Why would any version of a customer health score, NPS, customer health in general, be important to the marketing team?
I mean, it impacts our ability to sell, to provide that social proof to prospects, to provide that release comms. If customers aren't engaged with our product, they're not going to care when we send them a release communication or put out a new training video. So I think that's a big one. Super,
super, super true. Like if they're giving us a 1 on the NPS, they're deleting your feature announcements for sure. Yeah. like that's 1,000% happening. I mean, they're also, it's a great way, in my mind at least, to identify people that you should be asking for case studies and referrals and those sorts of things, which is just a great campaign to work on your marketing team with. Mm-hmm. What else?
Well, I mean, I just go back to like, I really care about, overall revenue and like net dollar retention, right? And like, it's just one of the leading indicators that will help me determine how well this, like, is this customer going to really help us grow? Should we be putting more energy and resources behind it? I take a very broad view of it, a very high level view, but I think it is very important. There's so many things that go into customer health. I'm sure we'll get into it. We're
going to keep it pretty high level today because I think there's like a whole customer health episode, and we'll get somebody from like CS leadership in and talk about it.
To interject real quick, I think the most important, and this is sales, this is CSM, this is marketing, is just establishing a good relationship. If you don't have a good relationship with that account, then nothing's going to move forward, and you're never really going to get those positive feedback NPS scores. You're not going to get product adoption. You're not going to get anything. So everything starts and stops with that relationship, not only from prospecting, but also from your customer.
1,000%. And by the way, NPS should be heavily used in determining your ICP, if you can. And what I mean by that is if I go look at my customer base and I have 43 industries in my customer base, and everybody that's in industrial manufacturing is like 10 out of 10, I want to refer you to everybody. Oh my God, let's market at industrial manufacturing, right? Like let's go get every person in industrial manufacturing, because that is our sweet spot from an actual customer happiness standpoint, which means we are solving problems for these people. We are helping them be more successful. We have referrals and case studies in the works because those people will absolutely provide them. Let's loop that into marketing campaigns like that. Let's use that to inform our just overall new business marketing strategy. Why wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm. Dude, I thought you didn't like NPS.
I think it's a lagging indicator for things like feature adoption and things like that. But I think it can be a good thing for identifying like what's being successful, what industries you're having success in. Typically, often the health of a customer, like likelihood that they're going to churn. I think what people typically use it for is incorrectly is they'll say like, well, we improved our product last month. Our NPS score should go up. Like it takes time. It often totally takes like 3 to 6 months for somebody to be like, okay, great. Yeah. Well, maybe never, right? Like that's why like onboarding is such an important thing is if you screw the pooch in onboarding, it doesn't matter how much better your product gets. The NPS score from that person is never going to be a 10. Like it's just not. And so that's the reason why I dislike it. See. Yeah. There are reasons to like it. There are valuable metrics around it.
Yeah.
Just why are you coming at me like this, man?
I just remembered in our CS CS episode, whatever early episode that was, you're like, I think it's a terrible metric.
I do.
That's all I remember.
Well, yeah, and there's reasons why. Like I said,
The only thing I
think
remember about that entire episode. No,
I don't remember anything about that episode. But were you guys in that episode? I don't know. You never really talk, anyways. But there are good things for it. I think people misuse it. Is sort of my thing. It's sort of to me like MQL goals. Like MQL is a great thing for like identifying gaps and figuring out things you can fix. But like, you shouldn't base your business around MQLs. It's an informative thing. It's not like NPS is an informative thing. It helps you identify places you can improve and do that sort of thing. And it's great to have goals around, but it can often be impacted by things that are outside your control. It's a lagging indicator, and it has to be taken with a grain of salt.
Well, I think that can be said for any metric. Any metric itself isn't inherently good or bad. It's how you use it. It's what you make of it, right?
Totally. 1,000%.
Spoken like a true marketer.
There you
go. Wow. I don't even have to attack you guys. You're doing it yourselves.
Hey, I'm a marketer too, so
I'm aware. It's self-deprecation going on today. This is wow. I'm going to let you guys just burn your own bridge down. So, all right. Does anybody have any other last thoughts on, by the way, customer health in general? I know we sort of focus this on NPS. Customer health in general, I think, can be used similarly to how you would use NPS, right? Like if people are really healthy in a specific industry, target the crap out of that industry. If people are giving you like great customer health scores and they're doing it well, then like let's ask them for case studies. Let's ask them for referrals. Let's get social proof from those people. Let's base our marketing material around what business problem we're solving for them. And let's base our sales approach around that same thing. Like these are great ways to inform and let's focus feature adoption on the features that they're using. Like that's going to increase longevity and everybody else, right? Like these things can inform your business in really powerful ways for sales marketing as well. Just don't, like, oh my God, customer health is bad. And by the way, don't say like 60% of my customer health score is sentiment. Like let's make it like not like actual data is important in these things, by the way. Like that's just a full stop caveat. Any other thoughts on customer health, NPS in general?
Yeah, no, I think we did a good job of high level coverage. It will help you inform where to focus your time and where you shouldn't be focusing your time. I mean, it's just another indicator out there. It shouldn't be the indicator, it's just another data point to help you decide.
And I think it's also important to know that even if the health of your customer is not great, if you have that great relationship, you can mitigate some of that concern and some of that potential churn by just having that good relationship. I've had so many tools that I've used where I just loved my CSM so much that I was willing to go out and give them good reviews just because I liked them so much, even though I wasn't in love with the product. So always keep that in mind too.
Totally. I know Andy Paul talks about this a bunch, right? Sales is relationship based. Talks about that all the time in the Sales Enablement podcast. He's 1,000% right. Customer success is also relationship based. Like it is very much the same thing. You need to have good relationships there. It doesn't matter if you're the best product in the world. If your CSM is terrible, your NPS score is definitely not 9 or 10. That's for sure. Yeah. Right. Like, so super valuable point, Jonathan, which is not a phrase I'm used to saying. So thank you for that. I'm sorry. That one felt mean coming out.
Man, he is salty today.
So salty. Oh man! Oh wow! That came out way too easily. All right. And that noise, of course, means that it is time for This Week on LinkedIn. And Alec will insert the noise there, I think. But I actually this week want to do something again slightly different with This Week on LinkedIn, and I want to invite Alec to join us for this question because I think he's going to have really strong opinions on it that I would like to hear. Alec, can you jump in?
I'm here.
All right, cool. So this week's question comes from Nate. And Nate has a bit of a long question, but I think it's a valuable one. When I was in partnerships, I did a lot of networking and even social selling, he puts in quotations. But I had to temper my posts and messaging to be more partner-oriented. So the question I have is, should my goal in social selling just be getting new partners organically? And as a head of RevOps, how do you view social selling? Is it something you would say you are doing, or are you just pushing reps to do it, and should sales reps be the ones doing it? So it's sort of a two-part question. And I'm going to defer to you guys first. Alec, I know you have an answer to that first part. So
Wait, say the first part again.
The question I have is, should my goal be in social selling just getting new partners?
No, it should be maintaining and growing the relationships with existing partners as well, I would imagine. I think you need to feed the thought leadership kind of machine consistently and not just, wait for partners to come to you. Maybe I don't understand the question. Thanks for giving me the big set.
No, but I think this is something we've talked about a lot, right? Like your goal in social selling isn't selling. Like it is establishing credibility, establishing yourself as a leader, as a trusted partner for your audience, and the selling comes after the fact, right?
Exactly.
Like it's networking and a lot. So like your goal. My goal in social selling, and by the way, to answer the second question, 1,000% I'm social selling. This podcast is social selling. Go to my LinkedIn, I'm social selling. Go to Brandon's LinkedIn, he's social selling. Jonathan never does any of it, and that's really problematic. But
he's getting there. We'll get him there.
He's trying. But yes, exactly. I'm social selling, and I'm not actually selling, but I'm establishing credibility for our business and our company by putting myself out there, creating thought leadership, creating this podcast, doing these sorts of things. It establishes credibility for our business, which is helping us social sell. It's not just AEs to social sell. It's on your entire company.
And the problem with it is it's like impossible to track to a certain degree. Like a lot of stuff is happening. People are seeing Jordan's posts or Brandon's posts, and like it's building an affinity with them and then the brand, and they'll maybe be sought out afterwards. But like just because you listen to this podcast and liked some of Jordan's posts and whatever, like we can't track all that all the time. You know what I mean? Like you have to.
If only we could cookie humans.
If only we could cookie.
But it's not, social selling isn't even just about selling, right? Like we've actually seen something from this podcast and from our LinkedIn activity from actually this group of human beings, which is a lot of our recent recruiting efforts. People have come in saying, I listened to the podcast and loved it. And I'm super excited to work with these guys, which thank you, everybody who said that. That's super flattering. I'm super excited to work with you too. And that's huge, right? That helps our business in meaningful ways that are well beyond just selling. Like it's the thought leadership, the credibility, the culture, the establishing your brand as a professional. That's super important. The way you show up to work every day is establishing your brand to your colleagues. That same approach should be on your social selling.
And people hate that term brand, but like you can phrase it as reputation, influence.
I love it. There's if anybody listens to Scott Galloway, he has a podcast, the Prof G podcast. He talks a lot about how in your early career, it's super important to establish your brand with your colleagues, and that's a lot of times he means that I think in how you engage every day at work and how you work with other people, but it's also he means it in how you pick a social network and establish your brand on that network as a professional. And whatever, like nomenclature be damned. Like I don't care if we use brand or what everybody says. It doesn't diminish the importance.
Agreed.
Yeah, and going back to, part of the earlier part of that question, like, well, why temper it to only people like now I'm selling and marketing to sales professionals, but a lot of my network is actually just marketing because I've sold to marketers in the past. A lot of the content that I put out is still just good content for marketers, because like you never know when a marketer sees my post and a sales rep asks him about Ring DNA. It's like, well, I don't know that much, but maybe talk to Brandon, or like I like Brandon's content. I've seen other great content out there. I have some trust with that company already. Like I don't think you have to necessarily temper your content towards any new specific audience that you're now selling into. Like I think just be yourself, put out great content, build those relationships, and I think that the sales will follow.
The rest will come. Yeah.
The rest will come.
When I sort of started doing it, when Alec made me start doing it, he actually grabbed an hour of my time on like a Friday afternoon, and we sat down, and he asked me like, what do you feel comfortable talking about? Like, what are you confident in as an expert? Like, what sort of content do you want to share to the world that you think people will like or that will provide value to people? And that to me was way more important than like what's going to help us sell more software. Because that was never the question. The question was like, what value can you provide to the world that you want to communicate out? And that's, I think, the question everybody should ask. And
I do, the follow-up though is I think that is the best way to sell more software.
Totally. Yeah. 1,000% agree. Yeah, like that. It is. It's the best way because it's organic. It's truthful. It's relatable for your audience. It's also something you're comfortable talking about. So it's going to make the whole process a lot easier.
Right. Yeah. Like it's natural. I think when people force themselves to talk about a specific topic or write about a specific topic, like it doesn't come across as genuine, and like that burns trust, or people can sniff that out right away, and it's not going to lead to, relationships and deals down the road. Like you just got to be yourself, be genuine, be authentic. Like that's what people want these days, specifically in particular, right? Like since we are all remote.
Totally.
Since we all want a little bit more connection, we want people to be actual relatable humans out there.
Totally. And if everybody has more questions about social selling, we did a whole episode on it, which I thought was really, really awesome. And everybody should go listen to it. Alec, before Jonathan, you don't get to talk about social selling because you don't do it. Alec, do you have any last thoughts on this that you want to drop in?
No, I mean, I think you said it was right about, you don't want to be, forcing yourself to try to be someone else, or you have to write about these certain things. But there is some value in being forcing yourself to be like, I'm going to post on this day, you know what I mean? Like once a week, have some kind of function there that does force you, because you're not always going to want to do it or want to whatever. So that kind of helps with accountability.
Totally. Super, super important. Set goals for yourself on when you post and achieve those goals. And you'll get that sweet dopamine hit. So
we're back to this.
Cool. All right. This was awesome, guys. Thank you for going into the CSM metrics with me. I think that was super important. For everybody that's listening, if you have questions, please submit them to me via LinkedIn for your This Week on LinkedIn. By the way, if anybody feels the urge to submit an audio or video question, we'd love to play your audio and include your name in the This Week on LinkedIn submission. Otherwise, you can, of course, message them to me and I will adopt them and sort of read them off so that we can get you an answer as quickly as possible. If you listen to the podcast and you love us, give us 5 stars and a good review. If you don't, I don't know why you're still listening 45 minutes in. And of course, we will see you guys next week. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.